Hello, welcome back. For over 5 decades, the Swaggart name echoed through radios and televisions across America, becoming synonymous with faith, salvation, and powerful evangelical preaching. At the center of this influential ministry stood Jimmy Swaggart, whose passionate sermons drew millions, and beside him was Francis Swaggart, a quiet yet powerful force behind the scenes. Their son, Donnie Swaggart, inherited not only their name but the mantle of their spiritual mission, stepping into leadership with fervor and a deep commitment to continue the legacy. From the outside, the Swaggart family appeared united, steadfast in their faith, unwavering in purpose. But like many families, hidden beneath their public image were personal truths that had been long buried until one day the silence could no longer hold. Donnie's journey into uncovering the truth didn't begin with rebellion or bitterness. It started with curiosity, a growing unease, and an unresolved tension that tugged at his conscience. As he began digging into old family documents and financial records, he stumbled upon something that made his heart stop: a court file tucked under a different name, detailing a fraud case from the 1960s. The woman in the file had the same birth date as his mother. As he read on, the reality settled in. The person he'd always known as Francis Swaggart had a hidden past she never spoke of. It wasn't a violent crime, but it was a serious case involving false identity, youth mistakes, and a carefully buried history. Donnie was stunned. The foundation he'd stood on for so long now felt unsteady, and the woman he had admired his whole life suddenly seemed like a stranger in parts. Confronting his mother wasn't easy. He waited for a quiet moment, away from church lights and cameras, and laid the papers before her. She didn't react with surprise. Instead, she responded with resignation. She had always feared this moment would come. In a trembling voice, she began to share her truth, a chapter of her life marked by misjudgment and pain. She was young, lost, and made choices that haunted her. But she had tried to leave that life behind by building something new with Jimmy and devoting herself to the ministry. "I never wanted you to carry my shame," she whispered. Donnie was torn between hurt and compassion, between the legacy he'd sworn to uphold and the truth he could no longer ignore. He didn't rush to reveal what he knew. Instead, he prayed, fasted, and sought guidance from those he trusted most. Some urged him to stay quiet. What good could come from bringing up the past? But Donnie felt that truth mattered, even when it was painful. He wasn't trying to disgrace his mother or damage the ministry. He believed healing required honesty, so with humility and a heart full of conflict, he prepared to speak, not as a preacher seeking shock or applause, but as a son and a man committed to integrity. When he finally stood before the congregation, there were no theatrics, just a steady voice and a heavy truth. He recounted what he'd learned and how it affected him. He spoke not to accuse, but to show that grace and redemption are only possible when we stop pretending. The reaction was mixed. Some were angry, others moved, but many were reminded that even the most revered families are made of real people with real pasts. Frances, shaken but relieved, retreated from public ministry and offered her own statement, asking for forgiveness and acknowledging the truth. For decades, she had lived in fear that the truth would destroy everything, but once spoken, it allowed her to finally breathe freely. What followed wasn't collapse, it was transformation. The ministry didn't fall apart, it changed. Donnie's messages became deeper, more vulnerable, focused less on appearance and more on grace. New people started paying attention, drawn not to perfection but to authenticity. The old guard may have questioned his choices, but many others saw strength in his honesty. The Swaggart legacy, once polished and unblemished, was now real. It became a story not of flawlessness, but of redemption. Donnie had carried a secret that wasn't his for too long. By choosing truth, he stepped into freedom and invited others to do the same. The ministry he leads now reflects the messiness and beauty of real faith, the kind that doesn't hide from the past but learns from it. His mother's past, once a source of silent shame, is now part of a much bigger story, one that shows how grace can redeem even the deepest wounds. And Donnie Swaggart, in choosing to stand by the truth instead of the illusion, not only honored the gospel he preached but gave new life to the ministry he inherited.